Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Talk Kashrus, presented by the Kashrus Awareness Project in conjunction with Torah Anytime. Today I am privileged to be joined by Rabbi Yakov Teichman, Rabbinic Coordinator at OK Kosher. Thank you, Rabbi Teichman, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Today we'd like to discuss the very important topic of post-Pesach shopping. This is a topic that gives a lot of angst to many a housewife. People get very nervous about buying Chometz after Pesach. Obviously, there's a very legitimate concern of Chometz Shavar of a Pesach. I know that you're a member of the committee, or perhaps the head of the committee of ACO in regards to post-Pesach. ACO every year puts out a comprehensive list of stores that people may buy Chometz from. Obviously, you do research to ensure that there are no issues of Chometz Shavar of a Pesach with these stores. So let's go through this issue one thing at a time. What should people know as a general rule about buying Chometz after Pesach?
So we first have to start with the halacha background. And we know that Chometz Shavar Pesach, which means Chometz that was in the possession of a Yid over Pesach, there's a knas from Chazal after Pesach that we cannot consume that Chometz. That is a knas, and it's not midaraisa, it's mutter, it's only a knas midarabanan. So since it's a halacha midarabanan, whenever there's a suffix involved, it allows a lot more leniency. So that's the first base information that we need to have in order to know where we move from there. Then we have to know that there are different options of how we can get out of this problem of Chometz. Because if you're in your house and you have leftover challah rolls, for whatever reason, or cereal, and you sell your Chometz, so after Pesach you don't have a problem because you sold your Chometz. Are there any other options? Let's say you have a business, you're a bakery, let's say you're a grocery store. There are many grocery stores that they cover up their shelves, they have a kosher Pesach section, and then all their Chometz stuff are covered. Why don't I have a problem with Chometz Shavuot of Pesach? So we know that Chazal helped us many years ago with something called Mechiras Chometz, that there was an option for people who had Chometz in order that they should be able to continue with their livelihood, that they should be able to sell their Chometz to the Goy. Originally, if my memory serves me correctly, they used to have the people who had liquor, so they just gave it to their Goyish neighbors. And Lav Dafka, they got it back after. They gave it B'natana. So Chazal were kaveh that you should be able to do a mechira. And mechira, and then it belongs to the Goy and you buy it back. And that morphed into more that different people should sell different parts of their pantries that they have Chometz. Some people are machmir that they don't want to sell Chometz Gomer, some want to Taru's Chometz. Everyone has their minhagim. And a lot of it is based on Hefsim Meruba, that the original takana was for somebody who has a business and he has a lot of liquor. So what's he supposed to do with all that whiskey and beer, etc.? So for him it's a Hefsim Meruba. For me, that I only have 2 bottles of beer, maybe it's not a Hefsim Meruba. So these are all shilas that are involved in how far you can take Mechiras Chometz. That's the basic overview. We do have to take into account that there are a lot of non-religious Jews that own different locations. And whether they own the Chometz, is that an issue or not? So Pashtus, if it's a Kanas, it applies to any Yid who owns a Chometz. There are some Achronim that do mention that if somebody who's a Tinik Shenishba, it might not be such an issue, but it seems that most people want to be Machmer across the board. So after Pesach, you basically have 1 or 2 options. Either you only buy from, or 3 options. You make sure to buy food that was only produced after Pesach, which you have to be able to figure out what that is, but that's option A. Option B is you'll buy from a location that is only owned by Goyim from beginning to end. And option 3 is you buy from somebody who did a mechira. So it's very simple if you go to from a own store, and you know that they did mechira, like you went in Pesach and you bought your kosher Pesach products, and you also saw all the aisles that were blocked off, that those are machar lenachri, so you know those are sold to a guy, and after Pesach they open it all up and you can go and buy it. But not everyone wants to rely on that, and not that there's an issue with the actual mechira is all done kedas kedin, but some people don't want to rely on that. They only want to buy something that did not go through this leniency. But you also have places that are owned by non from Yidden, and those places have been sold on some level, and even those there are different levels of how those sales are done, and those are a little less of a darga. Now, of course, with all this, you need to speak to your Rav, because the Rav is the one who understands all the sveikas involved. We mentioned in the past 2 minutes around 3-4 sveikas, and we could probably add in a few more sveikas. People want to know how much after Pesach Can you assume that it's new product and you go bust a rive or not? There are a lot of sfeikus involved. If you know the type of store, the type of product, there are certain stores that the way their ordering system works is that when you buy, let's say, a box of macaroni, the computer tells them a box of macaroni was purchased, and therefore we have to get new macaroni from the distributor. So such a place, macaroni is going to move much faster than your wheat brand because there are less people that are buying wheat brand. So wheat brand might sit on the shelf 3 months, but macaroni might be a turnover of a week. So these are all things that have to be taken into account.
And one of the things that people are clearly concerned about is that even if you show me a franchise, a big chain of supermarkets, for example, without naming any specifically, that is owned by a non-Jew, but there's concern that, let's say, the distributors and those who are providing food are Jews, and the food may be arriving on Yom Tov, right? Isn't that part of the issue with going into some of the non-Jewish owned stores?
Correct. So let's walk it back for a minute, and let's say you have a Jewish-owned store that sells the Chometz before Pesach, but they continue operating on Pesach. What's the halacha with them? So Moshe Feinstein Zatzah has a truth about it, and he says that even though that they are Ganavim Gazlanim, but the Mechira is Chal. So they sold their Chometz to a guy, and all their inventory was sold to a guy, but they continue doing business. So yes, the macaroni and the cereal.
Business with those items, you mean?
With those items, they're open. They're open to anyone, and their non-Jews are coming to buy, and they're making a profit. So they are stealing from the guy that they did the mechira with, but the mechira was chal. So therefore, the other products that they didn't sell, you can go and buy. You as a from Jew can go buy, and after Yom Tov, that only helps for a product that was in the store before Pesach started. He does not address what happens when they get new product in over Pesach. So that's something that has to be dealt with. So when you walk into a store, so you have a franchise, and you know that it's a Goyish-owned franchise, but they are being the distributor that they are getting the products from maybe is owned by Yid. What do you do with that? So again, like we said, these are all sveikis involved. So one main important halacha to remember about sveikis is that it has to be efshar levurei bakal. You have to be able to find out easily. Exactly what easily is, you'll speak to the Rav and I'll tell you. There's a lot of information that's available online, public information, and for sure, 15 years ago, a lot of information was available online, and you could see who the CEO is, who actually owns it. You can go do a Google search, and there's a lot of information available, and you could even see store X is getting from distributor Y, and you can connect the dots, and you can see there's an issue. As years go on, there's more and more privacy rights, and there's less and less information available online. So there's definitely, that issue has been a little bit mitigated, not to say that it's 100% mutter, but if you're not able to mevar it 100%, then the leniency is much more. So there is much more sveikas involved. So even though, let's say I knew that a certain store 10 years ago was being supplied by X distributor that's Jewish owned, and there was a mechira, or maybe the mechira was not so lechachila, and I didn't want to rely on it. So that store 10 years ago, I knew it was being supplied by this distributor. There has been information since then that has been cut off. The distributor has taken off all their information from online. It's no longer public information. There's no way for me to ascertain if they're actually getting from that distributor or not. So that's more of a suffix. We could say that maybe I have, for 20 years they were getting, why should I believe that they're not getting from that anymore? Happens to be that yesterday I went into a local store, a chain store, and for many years they were getting from a certain distributor, a well-known Jewish distributor that did a mechira, but it's not a mechira. And I asked them if they're still getting from them, and they notified me that in the past year and a half they cut off all ties from that distributor, and they're only doing in-house distribution, and they are 100% non-Jewish owned. So this is information that you need to keep on top of, and like we say, information is relevant only for that year. We had multiple meetings among the committee in the past few months, to come out with a clear list, and as time goes on, every day goes on, there's more information. Different information from last year. For example, last year there was a certain chain of stores, Albertsons. Albertsons is well known, and Albertsons owns, I think, like around 10 subsidiaries that maybe not in this local area, but across the country that it's relevant. 2% was owned by Jewish people, from Jewish people, and they did a mechira, and we'll talk about that type of mechira in a minute. But there's a mechira, and they will continue to be open on Pesach. So some people didn't necessarily want to be semich on that mechira. I understand it's 2%, and there's what to be mukkah to be machar for those who want. But as of this year, they sold us all their shares, so there's no longer a major shareholder that's a yid. There might be somebody who owns stocks, but not in any way that it would affect the mechiras chametz or the chametz shavuot Pesach.
Now, as far as the ACO committee list, when you list, just for example, if Walmart is on the list, I could go buy food at Walmart without being concerned at all about a Jewish distributor?
Correct.
It means that you a Mavarer.
Well, so the list has, we'll see this year how many categories it has, but it typically has between 5 and 8 categories, and those categories are 100% Jewish owned by non-Jews, but it is distributor comes from a Jew that does a mechira. Then there could be a different one that there's franchises that some are owned by Jews and some are not owned by Jews. There's a whole list, and you'll go through and it's clearly delineated where it falls.
Mm-hmm. Well, what's interesting listening to this conversation, listening to you to describe these achievements by the ACO post-Pesach committee, is that when I was younger, I remember for years in Brooklyn, just because that's where I grew up, I remember people would go into their local grocery that was owned by a guy, and the owner would give them permission to label certain items or to put a siman, and this way when they would come after Pesach, they would know that those items were there on Pesach, and they had this system in place. In Muncie, for example, for many years, my father-in-law used to go to the local ShopRite, and he was in charge of kind of negotiating and speaking to the owners of the supermarket as to what was coming in, what was not coming in, kind of to regulate it on an individual basis, one supermarket or one grocery store and things of that sort. Now it seems like there's more of a global effort to regulate and control and provide information to people. It's just interesting to witness how it's transformed over the years.
Right. So it's very important that you bring that up because that is true and that's still going on. And in Lakewood, by the Lakewood Shop, right, there's somebody who takes care every year to set aside a couple of pallets of flour and I think maybe macaroni and cereals, a few staples that they buy before Pesach, and they put it aside in the back, and it's owned by that store that's not Jewish owned, and then right after Pesach they bring it out. And that was, that was owned by a Goya, and there's no question about that. It wasn't owned by any Jewish hands at any time over Pesach. The point of this list is really geared towards Rabbanim. We are in 2025, and we know that anything that you're going to put out to anybody is going to be for the entire world. So we try to be as clear as possible.
Another interesting component of this conversation, whenever it comes up every year, is it's kind of a balance, and I hear people always debate this. It's like one of the favorite post-Pesach topics, and that is, should I be machmir on not relying on a mechira versus verzaktaboy and helping my fellow Yid who owns a grocery or a supermarket? I'm curious from your standpoint, do people come to you with that question? Okay, should I be machmir not to rely on a mechira and go buy by a non-Jewish owned store, or should I better go to my local supermarket who engages the services of a reputable Rav and does a real mechira? Well, I get to help my fellow Yid and give him the parnasa. I know that this is part of the conversation.
So this is part of the conversation, and when people ask me, I say you should speak to your local Rav. You should know who he is, and it might be the guy sitting next to you in shul is a guy who needs your assistance, and you don't even realize that you're helping him out by patronizing his store.
Right,
there's no question about it. But I do want to bring another point to the forefront that is important to keep in mind. So let's say you have a shutfis between a Yid and a Goy. So you have a corporation that's owned by 40% Yidden and 60% Goyim, and they're a distributor or whatever it is. So what is halacha in that case? So Rabbi Yakov inspector brings down in his chuvas, he brings down that you can go basarayv and you could assume that what you're eating is from the Goyim and you have no problem.
Meaning in this case, the Yid would not have to sell his portion of the company.
Correct.
And it's not considered Chometz Shavuot of Pesach.
Exactly.
When you pick up an item from that company, you rely on the Roiv.
Exactly. And they say this in the name of, Shimon Ayer said this in the name of Abraham Kotler Zatzal. So in Lakewood, a lot of the places can go with this psak. Other people have different mahalchei psak, but this is one of the sfeikas that's important to keep in mind. Another thing we have to understand is the mechira. So we spoke about a standard mechira that you do with your Rav. What happens? You have a Yid. He's not so from, and he's not willing to close down his company over Yom Tif, or he's not able to close down. He's a guy sitting next to you in shul, and he downs 3 times a day, and he's kaveitim, but he has Amazon business, and if you close down your Amazon business,
he'll lose his whole business.
He'll lose his whole business. What is his option? What is he supposed to do? So there's an option out there that, and I'm not getting involved whether it's a chavchila b'diavad, but it's just to understand what people are going through and what they have to do. There is an option there that they not only do they sell chometz, but they sell the business also. So therefore, by selling the business, so if I'm selling to the John the guy, so now besides the fact that I sold him $5 million of actual chometz, but I also sold him the company. So now for the next 8 days or 10 days or 14 days, however long I make that mechira on the business, I sell on the business, and all the operations of business have to do with him. So he has the right to buy and sell, and whatever is done in the operations of business belongs to him only. And since it belongs to him, there's no problem with Chometz Shabbat Pesach. As you can understand, that's not the same lechatchila as when you sell and you have nothing to do with the chametz, because the operations continuously going.
And it's earning profit.
And they're earning profit. So
and the guy doesn't keep the profit after Yom Tov,
no,
or does he?
So there are different levels of mechira, different rabbanim do different ways. Every Rav has his way of doing it and his shtar, and you would have to speak to each Rav to find out. Some do it $20 profit, because they say, listen, we cancel out. Yes, you made a lot of profit over 8, 10 days, whatever it is, but listen, there's a large overhead. We got to pay for electricity, we got to pay for insurance, and you do a deal for only 10 days, the insurance you have to pay is very high. We could play around with the numbers to basically cancel it out. Others, Rabbi Belsky Zatzal had a mahalach that he said that we have to put it to 3 arbitrators that are not related to the company to go through all the numbers, and
they decide how much.
They decide. But if you don't do it within 72 hours after Pesach, then you're going to agree to accept $100 to buy back or something like that. So to give them that caveat, if they want to go through the whole arbitrary, the arbiters, which is going to be a big deal, or to just accept the money, and as you can assume, in all the years of everyone doing this, the guy just accepts the money in lieu of going through that whole exercise.
But we thank you, and we thank the rest of the ACO committee for their efforts in providing information. We always say an educated consumer is the best customer. That's what we try to do here at Kashrus Awareness, is educate people, provide them with the information that they could then take to their Rav and their Meir Derech. So thank you for all your efforts on behalf of Klal Yisrael.
My pleasure.
Thank you for being here.